Hi, my name is Tim Burridge. I just thought I would share with you a quick technique of getting a semi-photorealistic render using cycles and Blender and some displacement mapping. So to start it all off, we have our default scene with cycles set as the preferred rendering engine. I'm just going to edit my cube and delete the front face. I'm going to select the whole thing and scale it up a bit. Extrude out the back of the open-ended cube. Extrude once more. Maybe you can be fairly free with this. It's not like a particular part of the tutorial. I'm just making the like the inside of the cave system. The camera is going to be placed outside the front of the cave, looking in. So you don't have to be too particular about how this looks. Maybe make it go down, scale up a bit. This side, let's make it go up and back. So just extruding with the E key. This is a simpler tutorial. I'll be releasing another tutorial doing the same thing, only using a more advanced technique using dynamic topology and sculpting for a slightly more fine-tunable result. So now that we have that, I'm going to select this front edge loop using Alt-Shift right-click on the edge. Let's what should we do here? Extrude the bottom one out, and no, let's extrude all of them out. Scale it up a bit, move it up on the Z axis so there's not too much of a problem there. On the X, you're going to want to make a face. This is going to be the outside of like the mountain or the mound of snow, and just like extrude that up and back a bit, maybe forwards. It's not too particular. Select the right edge here, and we're going to extrude that out in a long. You want to make it pretty far back, maybe curve it away a bit. You don't have to be too particular because we'll be using a subsurf modifier on this later to smooth everything out. And then do the same thing for the left side. Extrude along, maybe up a bit, and then just select the bottom bit there and just extrude that out. So now that we have like a really crappy looking cave, gonna hit Control 3, and that gives it a nice subsurf, which is like smoothing. Still in edit mode, you still have the raw base mesh. Select everything, hit W, go shade smooth. So that's looking good. So that's basically all we really need now. It already has a material, so just either give it a new material or leave it a nice white color, will be fine. Go to the texture window on the right here, and under brush, just add a new texture for the brush. Leave it at clouds. That's good. You're not actually going to be applying this texture, this cloud texture, to the material. We're just using it as a displacement map. So now add a modifier to the cave mountain system here. Go add modifier and then displace. Select your texture, which will be a cloud. add a couple more subdivisions. You can see that's very intense, so we're going to, under strength, we're going to turn it down to 0.2. Not too bad. Add another subdivision. So that's 6 subdivisions. We currently have 291,585 vertices. That's not too bad. It looks a bit big, so go back to the texture. Put the size as 0.5. Actually 0.1. Now turn down the strength to 0.1 as well. It's just like a back and forth, you know, until you get your desired look. If you have lots of large noise, say you put the texture to like 0.5, what you'll end up happening is you'll have a cave that looks small. Then if you have noise like the cloud texture to be really small, you'll make it look like it's really huge. So around 0.1 seems to be alright. We want this larger. So if a man was standing in the middle, say 2 meters tall, you'd want his head to be maybe about halfway, so the actual cave from floor to roof should be about 4 meters. So we're going for something that's large here. Let's just set up the camera. Move that over to the left here. Rotate it on the Z-axis using RZ, and move on the Z-axis using G, then Z. Let's rotate it up. You can use Control F to like move around using the mouse, and change the focal length to 18 millimeters. Yeah, that's not too bad. Move it out a bit so that we're not getting that seeing the sky up there. So that's not too bad. Composition's alright. Turn on, let's say, thirds. Maybe fix it up a bit. You want the interior of the cave there to be along one of the rulers, for the rule of thirds, one of the lines. Okay, so now the resolution isn't quite good enough for me here, so I'm just going to lower it back down to 1 subdivision, which is really coarse, and then I'm just going to hit apply. So we'll have that'll change our base mesh, so we'll have more faces now. But then if we add another subdivision surface and move that modifier up to the top of the stack, move on up back to 5 and then 6. You should be aware that with this huge amount of vertices, it will slow down your viewport rendering quite a bit. So just be warned, doing things within Blender will be slow. The benefit is that once you have it to a good render, like a good setting that you can render with, you put the render settings up to 6 and then drop the viewport subdivisions down to like maybe 3, so it's still really fast and you can edit, but once you render it'll still look really good. So go back into camera mode. It's looking alright. The mesh still is pretty coarse where it's close to the camera. We might be able to fix that in Photoshop with some blurring or something. Okay, so now let's set up the environment. I'm going to hide, let's put the view back down to 3 so it's nice and fast here. Find the default blender lamp and delete that. We don't need that. And then Shift A, and let's add a sun lamp. Move that back out, size it up. So let's point it. This is just like how I want it. You can have the sun pointing which way you want. So now, because I have a NVIDIA GPU, I can use GPU computing. So I'm just going to preview my cycle scene using the automatic rendering, kind of viewport rendering. Looking alright. We're certainly missing a lot. So what we want is we want the sun to be really bright. So let's put the strength up to, let's say, 10. Because then what we're going to do, see, it's going to be super bright, like way too bright. What we're then going to do is, because this is more realistic, the sun is, you know, in the snow it'd be really that bright if you expose her inside the cavern. We're going to go to the scene tab, and under color management we're going to drop the exposure down until it's nicely exposed, and then let's add a sky. So go to the world tab, under surface click use nodes, and let's add a sky texture. Just zoom out so we can see here. Not quite what I was going for. You can play around with the settings here. What I'm really looking for is nice blue shadows. So we need like a nice bright sky. So let's bring the I just pulled the strength up to 20. Let's try 10, which is the same as our sun. Play with turbidity. We want, because this is meant to be up in the mountains, we don't want anything too hazy. The air's generally really, because it's there's less oxygen and whatnot, you're closer to the edge of the atmosphere, the higher up you go, there's less haze and whatnot. The air's generally pretty crystal clear. So let's test that out. Yeah, not too bad. Certainly what we're looking for with that blue kind of shadow. I'm not quite sure it's blue enough. You can always use a HDR or even low dynamic range lat long image for your lighting for the sky if you wish. I'm gonna play around with, because most people might not have a HDR that they can use. I'm just going to use the sky texture here and change it around. What can I do to make it more blue? Let's go into the compositor, go to materials, and we want world material. See, we have our sun. Let's put in a color. Hue saturation. Maybe we can bump the saturation up. Go back into the renderer. Bumping the saturation up seems to give the sky a much more blue effect. So what's that? 1.3 approximately. So let's do a render. I'm going to go into my render settings and render this out at 25% of 1080p. I'm going to change my output to OpenEXR, float full, zip losses should be fine. We've got our dynamic mesh system using subsurf modifier set to render for 6. So let's just hit F12 and see what happens. It'll have to build quite a hefty BVH because there's quite a few vertices here. Rendering wasn't too slow. See, that's looking good. The only problem with this technique using displacement modifiers is that you have no control over what's going to be displaced and what's going to be smooth. So right now everything around the cavern is bumpy, which is, yeah, not too bad. So let's just edit our mesh around the cavern just to give it a cooler appearance. I'm going to turn on proportional editing. Select a vertice up here on the right, scroll to make the proportional editing larger, and let's just move it back on the y-axis so that we have some dynamic looking mountain stuff going on in the background. Move it back a bit. How does this look? You'll have to build the BVH every time you hit F12, but it's not too bad. Not too poor a problem. See, that's looking good. I think I might, as you can see, the top of the cave, the top of the mouth of the cave is very out there. Like a general hill slope will be sloping back a bit. This seems to be a bit too forward, so I'm just gonna select a couple vertices up there and move that whole kind of area back a bit, just so that we get a nice kind of curve going on there. This is all just like my personal preference, you know. You can have the cave look however you want. You can even go ahead and model a nice person to stand in the cave, or maybe some like scientific equipment or cables coming in and out of the cave to kind of, you know, give the render a bit of story. This is just to set up the scene, basically environmental scene. You can take that further. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just bump up the resolution and the sampling to, let's say, render 50 samples, and render again. This is at 50% of 1920 by 1080 pixels. So it'll take a little bit longer. We're leaving it on path tracing with the default, which is full global illumination, because we have light bouncing all around the inside of the cave here. You want to leave it on full, otherwise if you go to direct light or limited global illumination, the interior of the cavern will be darker and it won't be as realistic. So that's not too bad. I'm fairly happy with that. Let's reposition the camera a bit, just so we can see more into the cave, and it takes up more of a larger area of the scene. So we've got our environment set up. Now that we're rendering out, you can play around with the color management. Because we're on default, we've got the exposure set back a bit, but there's quite a few nice presets like RRT, film, raw, and log. I'll be rendering this out as an EXR image. Should I? The benefit of rendering out as a 32-bit EXR image is you can then change the exposure later, versus not being able to having to redo it in Blender. So that's right. For the final render, I'm going to bump up the sample so that the noise in the back of the tunnel there isn't quite so strong. Maybe add, or you could always add a nice, like a blue or a red, maybe a red lamp in there to show like there's someone setting up with like a flare or something, you know, add a bit of style. So this is just like a basic setup. In my more advanced tutorial later on, I'll be explaining how to add like footprints and smooth out the bottom of the cave, and maybe add some icicles or a path where a sled has gone by, that kind of stuff. But this is alright for a simple. So let's render out the final thing. I'm going to put my samples up to, let's say, 300, reasonably low. I recently did a video where each frame had 900 samples per frame. Rendering out at 720p ended up taking on GPU probably like 3 minutes a frame on average, so it took a while. Leaving everything at max. Good. Okay, so let's just render this out. F12. I'll leave it on recording whilst it renders, just so you can see, and I'll talk to you whilst it's happening. So because we're just using really simple kind of lighting setups, this is pretty much something that everyone can do. You could always end up, like I said, you could always end up using a high dynamic range, equirectangular image captured of a sky somewhere for image based lighting. But I think the built-in sky shader works quite well for this kind of scenario. So it's not bad. You can always ramp up the like do another subdivision level if you want even more detail and less jagged edges in your mesh. That just means that building the BVH will take longer, and navigating the scene might be a little bit harder, that kind of stuff. What this scene is really playing on is the fall off of light. As the natural light from the sun comes in, we only have one light source, yet it's bouncing around within the white walls, the snow walls of this tunnel. So it's really kind of interesting scenario where you have quite a dynamic looking zone with only a very simple lighting rig, just one sunset and a sky. I actually got this idea of a snow cavern off someone posted on the Blender artist forums. A nice render from, actually the camera was placed within the cavern, kind of looking out, and I really kind of liked that look, so I just thought I'd do my own version of that as a tutorial. I'll put the link to that thread in the description. What I'm gonna do after this is just open up the file in an image editor and just do basic denoising. You can do this in Blender using compositing nodes, but it's not quite as fast and a little bit more inflexible. So I think I'll just do it in the image editor, maybe add some more contrast or maybe a bit of glow or something. A step further after this to make your scene look better would be, maybe you could do a nice particle simulation of sleet whipping past the camera, render it out as a separate layer, and add some motion blur to it, and then you can composite that on top of your tunnel, your base render, the first render that we're doing now. And it did end up looking like there's a nice snowstorm happening where the cameraman is standing. The way that we've got it at the moment is the sun size, so the shadow size is the sun size is small, so the shadows are going to be more defined and sharp. If you were going to do like a snowstorm thing, you're going to make the sun really broad, like it's overcast, so you really just have one big white light versus like a pinpoint kind of sharp parallel rays kind of thing, to make it more realistic, and then maybe make the whole thing a little bit more dimmer, because the it'll be bright, but it won't be quite as bright as if it was like a clear sky. You wouldn't need to focus on the sky shader then, because the blue atmospheric emission won't be as prevalent with a snowstorm happening. What we're looking for in this is if you ever try to take a photo in the snow, it'll be quite blown out. If you're like say you're exposing for someone's face, they'll be much darker than the snow around them, just because it reflects so much light from the sun. So what we're gonna do here is maybe like borderline blow out some of the whites just on the snow near to the camera. That way that the interior of the tunnel is a little bit more exposed and it looks like a little bit less fake, because a lot of things in CGI is always perfectly exposed and not dirty and everything's placed perfectly because you have to create their environment yourself, versus like taking photo, you know, exposure might not be right, might be blurry, something might have moved, you know, there might be something on the floor that shouldn't be there, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this very simple tutorial. Once again I'll be talking about using dynamic topology sculpting and using the cloud texture as actual brush texture versus applying it as a displacement. This means that you have more vertices located where you need them and not, so it's slightly more efficient, but it takes a bit longer and so on. Yeah, so thanks for watching.